coal was so much cheaper than wood, and wood was used largely as a building material, as you'll see in just a minute. There are important drivers in this transition. Transportation costs, obviously, the economics of resupply and western migration. Again, until the railroad, settlers to the west came to Pittsburgh and resupplied. There was abundance of textile mills and furniture factories and all types of factories producing goods that western settlers would take with them in moving to the west. Once you have the railroad come in, this general economy in Pittsburgh transitions very rapidly, and these areas that disappear because of competition with eastern goods, superior made goods, cheaper goods, and what is left in this region is basically specialization in the region's resources. And I'll say more about that. We're talking mainly iron and steel and glass here. So we're looking at Pennsylvania coal. Coal is a major determinant of Pittsburgh's past and present in many conditions, in many instances. And you can see the yellow here for the bituminous coal. The purple is the anthracite coal to the east. This is the Pittsburgh coal seam area. It's a little hard to see, but you see essentially Pittsburgh integrated all the way down into West Virginia, in Ohio, and even parts of Maryland. And this is all the Pittsburgh coal seam, the Pittsburgh coal field, and we're really just sort of on the edge of it in Pittsburgh. And because of the rivers, and because of railroad transportation, we essentially have this regional economy. And these, the vestiges of the Pittsburgh coal seam are still with the energy systems that we see today and are trying to transition out of. I'll also put up a map of the Connellsville coal field, which lies to the east of the Pittsburgh seam, and it plays a very major role because it was probably the world's best metallurgical coal, or basically coal that could be coke for metallurgical processes, smelting of iron. And this Connellsville coal plays a very symbiotic relationship in the region's economy. So I'm going to skip that for right now. But let me note two things. That coal production in Pennsylvania actually peaks, bituminous coal, in 1918. Okay? Iron and steel production in the region, in terms of the region's market share, peaks in 1915. So in some respects, you can look at the period around World War I as sort of the peak of, in terms of Pittsburgh's prominence and Pennsylvania's prominence in what we might call, and what Mumford called, a Carboniferous capitalism. And if you were out just on the Mon River, just up the river just a little bit, in 1890 or so, or 1850 or so, it doesn't make any difference. You see these massive coal barges, some of them carrying coal, steam coal, the Pittsburgh coal, some of them carrying metallurgical coke, and you see the steamboats. The steamboats played a major role in the economy for two reasons. The Ohio River, essentially the Mon and the Allegheny, but 40% of all the Western steamboats were built in the Pittsburgh region. And very early on, you have steam engine technology coming to Pittsburgh. Oliver Evans builds a factory here in 1809, and others build steam engine factories. And not only just the boats that were built in the Pittsburgh region had essentially steam engines built and boilers built in Pittsburgh, but engines went out on those boats for other purposes, for mills down in the South, lumber mills, sugar mills, etc. So these steamboats were very important, and the wood, again, was basically going into these very short-lived steamboats. So the railroad really integrated this. You have essentially wood and coal coming together. And then essentially you have, in 1850s, you have the development of the first coke-fired blast furnace in the Pittsburgh region. And it just took place just out of sight across the river here. It was the Clinton furnace. Connellsville coke was the fuel, and iron refinery and specialty steel making, crucible steel, were also done in the region. So the region had both large-scale production of iron and steel as well as specialty steels. And then in the 1870s, Andrew Carnegie, who had been in the iron business, built the region's first integrated steel mill. 5 miles up the Mon, the Edgar Thomson Works. It's the first of 11 integrated steel mills that will be built in this region that made Pittsburgh the steel city. As a matter of fact, this plant is the last integrated mill. There are no others. It's the last operating, and how long it will operate depends on a lot of factors. This whole region was essentially devoted to iron and steel production, again, coal and coke drove it. And here you have the Clinton Works across the river. You can go over to Station Square and see this plaque in here, and you see the steamboats playing a major role in this, driving, pushing the barges, etc., on the rivers. The coking of the coal was done primarily in the Connellsville region in Beehive coke ovens. And these were terrible ovens in terms of pollution. You can see essentially all of the volatile products that were driven off in this process, reduction process of the coal to coke, either went up in the air or out into the groundwater, into the other streams, etc. And it's not until the early 20th century that you see the development of byproduct coking. More on this in just a minute. So here's a picture of Carnegie's Edgar Thomson work. This is one plate of a 5-plate panorama. So you just get a sense of what this factory looked like and the scale, and eventually there are others bigger built in the other 10 that were built in the region. And this is a satellite view of the Edgar Thomson Works about 2010 or so that I made, and you can look down on it and you can see essentially the differentiation between the river, the plant size, and the greenery. There's a golf course just up on the edge of that, so you get some sense of the region. Pittsburgh also played a role in the development of oil. Oil was discovered in Venango County to the north, about 100 miles north of Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh capitalists played a major role. Indeed, Andrew Carnegie speculated in oil, made a good part of his initial fortune in oil, and then got out because he considered to be the market was too speculative, too volatile for his risk factors. Pittsburgh was initially a center of oil refining as well as oil field equipment that went up into the oil counties to the north, and then spread with the development of oil in Ohio and Indiana and on out to Texas in terms of oil field equipment. Pittsburgh had a very short role in terms of refining development because John D. Rockefeller and Standard Oil built a major refinery, very large scale, high throughput, full economies of scale factory in Cleveland, and essentially closed down most of the refineries, inefficient refineries that he had built. So these scale economics play a major role in the region. And Pittsburgh has played almost no role in there. We once had a fairly abundant oil field equipment manufacturing industry. Okay, and perhaps we'll come back though with the Utica Shale and its development in terms of oil. And you'll just notice the state of Pennsylvania here, and you'll see that the Pittsburgh region essentially sits on the deepest parts of the Utica Shale. And we'll see how that plays out. Natural gas. Interesting story about natural gas is that we've essentially had 3 takes on natural gas. The first take took place in the 1880s to early 1890s. It was a very rapid transition to natural gas. George Westinghouse, who had pioneered in air brake development here in Pittsburgh, as well as Union Switch and Signal, railroad equipment, and then Westinghouse Electric Power, drilled a well on his estate in the east end of Pittsburgh, what is known as Point Breeze. in 1884, the first well came online there. He built a company, the Philadelphia Company. There were other entrants into this. And natural gas was projected essentially to be the new savior of Pittsburgh. It was going to clean up Pittsburgh's air. There was massive and rapid substitution of natural gas for all the coal heating and illumination purposes, substituted for manufactured gas that was made from coal. And this revolution was very rapid. It was seen as lasting forever. But in fact, there's the Westinghouse well number 1. There's the estate. You can see that on the slides. And then this is off to the east of that, Murraysville, and into the county, Westmoreland County, to the east of Pittsburgh. Very rapid development down on the river, illuminating with natural gas, just with open flames. And then essentially, in the early 1890s, this gas deal began to play out. The gas deals, very shallow wells, very quick payouts. And by the end of the 1900s, you effectively have a natural gas shortage. And essentially the region goes back into making manufactured gas from coal. There was an energy crisis just after World War I, and essentially the coal as a source of gas strengthened in there. So that was sort of the first take. The second take is a well-known story. This is the story of Big Inch and Little Inch coming initially for oil during World War II and then being repurposed to natural gas. And the regulation initially in the city of Pittsburgh and then in Allegheny County and then in other counties in the region, regulating essentially natural gas to be used for heating. Largely as an initiative to clean up Pittsburgh's air as part of the Pittsburgh Renaissance. This is a post-World War II story. And essentially brings Pittsburgh into a national energy economy in terms of where the price of gas would come. It's a well-known story, and I skipped this. This is the big one. And then, of course, we have our current natural gas take. It's seen as a revolution, at least when it began in 2007, seen as a revolution. Again, a very quick transformation of the region, a lot of predictions about how long this would last, all of the kind of infrastructure that will be built. Some of it has been built. And it's an evolving story, obviously. The Saudis are intervening in terms of the economy and essentially shale gas production throughout North America, including the Marcellus region. And we also have a fact, not radically different from those initial gas wells drilled in Pittsburgh in the 1880s, and that Marcellus shale gas pays out very rapidly. You have depletion, and you either have to refract or abandon those wells. And so I put in this little Penn State thing, if you haven't seen it, of the number of unconventional wells drilled essentially in the Marcellus shale, and you have from 2004 to March 31st, 2015, the red dots. So I'll just let that play for just a minute and you can see. And again, you can see how Pittsburgh sits sort of in the middle of this region, but up in the northeastern part of the state, we have basically a more intense development of shale because that's where it's thickest. That's where the highest efficiencies. Okay, so that's region. And so here's a nice little curve to show essentially how fast the gas market comes in. So I've mentioned processed gas. The only thing that I would mention is a new technology that's byproduct. Coking came in during World War II, largely because the U.S. didn't have any synthetic organic chemicals. Those were made in Germany. And so you have this connection with the war, and you have development largely by Andrew Carnegie buying coppers and bringing it to Pittsburgh and essentially beginning byproduct coking, which creates not only the coke, but it also creates a large amount of processed gas. This whole region had processed gas lines running up and down the rivers, along the railroads, and you also had the beginning of the coal tar chemicals industry in the region that operated on a national scale with the development of this whole chemicals business in the United States. I don't have time to talk about the role of George Westinghouse and Westinghouse Electric Manufacturing Company. It is a regional story, it's a technological story, it's an important story. It's driven by consumer demand, again, much of stuff that Severin Borenstein has talked about. That brings us, though, with Westinghouse to Pittsburgh and being a nuclear-powered region. That was once the vision in the early 1950s in Pittsburgh. That's because Westinghouse played a major role during the Cold War in the development of pressurized water reactors for the Navy, for the nuclear Navy. And because of a political situation during the Cold War, Eisenhower's anxiety and desire to begin making civilian uses of nuclear power instead of keep building atomic bombs and hydrogen bombs and all of the infrastructures necessary for that mad approach. We see what was essentially a reactor for an aircraft carrier rapidly adopted for the so-called first commercial scale nuclear power. It's a 60 megawatt plant, shipping port plant, demonstration, a lot of public relations, etc. It turns out that this was a short-lived development. We only have one nuclear plant in the region that still is in existence, the 1 and 2 Beaver plants. But essentially you have political and international considerations driving what takes place in the region. There's the shipping port plant over on the Ohio River. And you can see industry on the river on the other side of the river. So I'm going to skip that. You can again see in this map, you see both the coal-fired electric power plants, and you see the one nuclear power plant today in the region. Now, of course, I'm going to wrap it up. This is my last slide. Of course, there's a lot of promise with respect to Westinghouse's AP1000, and the future of nuclear energy is uncertain given climate change conditions. The future of the region and the nation is uncertain because of regulation with respect to climate change. How fast we'll transition to a renewable economy is anybody's question. I like to end with a photograph or an image that I show my classes. This is from a book called The Economic History of World Population, essentially of energy transitions. This is the long point of view. And it really depends upon your point of view in terms of time as well as location of these energy transitions. Let me say that Pittsburgh has had an exciting 2 centuries of energy transitions, quite remarkable story, unlike any other region in the United States. Thank you.
David, thank you for your time. Fascinating presentation. We're going to move to our 2 plenary sessions, and I'm going to ask Julie and Ken to start as soon as possible. We'll cut into the coffee break. We'll still plan the afternoon concurrence to start at 4:30. So, David, again, thank you very much. I'm sure he'll be around to take any kind of questions. Finally, we do want to take some photographs of the senior fellows that are in the audience. Come on up. Thank you.